Okay, I've been told we're ready to go, so we might as well get started. And the sooner we get started, usually the sooner we get done. The webcast is working. I would remind you that this meeting is subject to the Texas Open Meetings Act, and as a result, will be webcast. Behave yourselves accordingly. Has everybody had their lunch taken care of, their lunch envelope picked up and paid for that and all of that? Okay, good. And I'd remind you that when speaking, remember to turn on your microphone, and when not speaking, turn it off, because it will hear things that you may not wish to share with the general public. We'll have a working lunch about 11:30, and I'm sure that you'll remind us if we get too excited and begin to go past that. I would like to have everyone introduce themselves and say a little bit about what your role is at your home institution. Marilyn, can you start?
Good morning. My name is Marilyn Haggerty, and I'm here as a substitute for Dr. Kristen Croyle. I'm the director for the University Academic Advising Center at UT Pan American.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Luann Berman from the University of Texas at Tyler, and I'm the Assistant Vice President for Assessment and Institutional Effectiveness, and I'm sitting in for Dr. Dennis Calley, our Department Chair for Communications.
Good morning. My name is Itza Figueroa, and I'm the undergraduate student at the University of Texas at El Paso.
I'm Jennifer Morgan, and I'm from UT Austin, and I'm sitting in for Larry Abraham. He's the interim Dean of Undergraduate Studies at UT, and I manage the core curriculum at UT Austin.
My name is Ann Kennemer. I'm the Associate Provost for Undergraduate Studies at Texas A&M University.
I'm Linda Gann from Ranger College, and I'm a Workforce Chair.
I'm Donna Atkins from Coastal Bend College, and I'm Chair of Human Services and Business Administration.
Jeremy McMillan at Grayson College, President.
Colleen Smith at Collin College. I'm the District Senior Vice President.
Van Wigington, Provost, Central College Central Campus.
Fred Hills, Dean of Arts and Sciences at McLennan Community College.
And I'm Dave Below. I'm Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs at Texas A&M Corpus Christi.
Hello, I'm James Goman. I'm an Assistant Director here in the Department of Universities and Health-Related Institutions, and I help manage this committee and a few others now since Lucy's departed. We all miss her. I'm sure you guys do. She was a great person to work with. So I'm picking up on things in her absence until we find another person to fill that spot. Won't say a replacement since she's irreplaceable, but we've got to find someone else to help run things. So I'm really pleased to be here, and I look forward to getting to know all of you a little bit better.
I'm Melinda Valdez-Ellis. I'm a program director. I work directly with James, helping him do everything he just explained to you, lending some support and taking over or trying to take over a lot of what Lucy was doing, hence my appearance here. Welcome, everybody.
I'm Nancy Martin, Associate Vice Provost for Core Curriculum and QEP, University of Texas at San Antonio.
I'm Sheila Piñeras, Associate Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education at the University of Texas at Dallas.
Chris Ritzy, Sul State University, Department of Biology Chair.
I'm Diane Taylor from Tarleton State. I'm an Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs.
Thank you all. Just by a show of hands, how many of you are new members of UEAC? Very good. And how many is this your last UEAC? Are you rotating off? You're both new and this is your last? How'd you work that? Everybody will want to know. Again, how many, or is this your last meeting? I think that some of our substitutes must be last meeting too. Okay. One of the things that we have to do today is elect a committee co-chair. Terry Walsh retired, and as a result, that position is open. And so what I would like to do is just open the floor to nominations. This person should be the co-chair should be a representative from a community college. And if anybody has a nomination, and then we'll take a vote. It's not a hard job. I can testify to that.
I'll nominate Colleen Smith.
Okay. Any other nominations? I'll hear a motion to close the nominations.
So moved. So moved.
Second? Do you want to see if we get a unanimous vote? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Congratulations, Colleen.
Thank you. I'll do my best.
And we've arrived at the meeting summary. If you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at that, read through it quickly, and we'll take a couple of minutes and then see if we can get that approved.
Maybe handle with the staff that we have. HB 1296 is more general. It's about making an annual projection of workforce need for the next 3-year period. This is something we generally do anyway, but that occasionally happens. We get the legislature to tell us or to tell you guys to do things that we're already doing. Yeah, that happens sometimes. And so this is, of course, we'll go ahead and do this, but we generally do workforce projections anyway. And certainly the Workforce Commission does. That's a big part of what they're all about. HB 1297 is going to require us to work with the A&M Extension Service and the community and technical colleges and conduct a review of the customized training programs. And again, your training programs already have reviews, and we're involved in this already, but we will do more. SB 441 establishes the Texas Fast Start program to promote rapid delivery of workforce education. It's, again, basically this is something that has been in the mind of state leaders, state workforce leaders, state political leaders for a while. High demand fields or occupations. You guys are already trying to address those, I know. Perhaps there's more we can do in this area as well. And HB 5, as I said, even though it's not strictly in our purview, this is really more about the TEA and the schools, the K-12 schools. This is going to have a big impact on us through time, so it's worth looking at. In particular, it's worth noting that we used to have these different kinds of high school curricula, and now it's pretty much been boiled down into a single foundation high school program, although there are bells and whistles that can be added on to that single foundation high school program. It's more unified than it was previously. Significant there's been some improvement in the ability of students to use CTE courses to satisfy some of the math and science requirements, and I know that's something that a lot of folks in the 2-year sector have been interested in having happen for a while now. And probably in the biggest change, and certainly one of the things that was most in the news, was all of those end of course exams, right? We used to have, I think, 15, or we were planning to have 15. Now we will have 5, 1/3 the original number. And it's going to be, as I say here, Algebra 1, Biology, English 1, English 2, and U.S. History. And I note in the very next one, Algebra 2 and English 3 are not eliminated, but they are no longer mandatory. Students don't have to take them, but students can take them, and we hope that some of them at least will take them, because we have been planning on using those 2 exams to establish dual credit eligibility. since tax is going away, right? Right now, students use their tax scores, and it's free, and everybody takes it. So it's a really nice, convenient mechanism to get students moving through and into dual credit. But now they don't have to take those. So it's going to require perhaps a little more liaison activity between you and your local high schools. Talk to the principals and the counselors and say, hey, those students that you think maybe in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, 10th grade, certainly 7th, 8th, and 9th, that they're headed towards or could be headed towards dual credit, or you want to encourage them to head towards dual credit, be thinking about the courses they're going to take and encourage them to sequence those courses so they would be positioned to take Algebra 2 and English 3 at the right time. Because right now, a lot of those students are going to be taking those, would be taking those exams kind of late, maybe not until their junior year, which means then they couldn't qualify for dual credit until their senior year. And there at the bottom, I particularly want you to note this, particularly for those folks at in the two-year colleges. Repeals TEC 390241 is related to junior college service areas, and in particular limits a high school student to 3 courses taken from a junior college outside of the immediate junior college's service area. What that means is, if you have dual credit students and they are not in your service area, they're going to be limited to 3 courses, and the bill didn't specify, so we had to go back and ask for legislative intent. Legislative intent was 3 courses per year, so that's how we're going to be writing the rules. 3 courses per year. Other significant bills, 497. Well, you all knew it was coming, I would imagine, or at least you'd heard it talked about. Several years ago, the 4-year sector got limited to 120 semester credit hours for the baccalaureate degrees, unless there is a compelling academic need that you can justify. Now, the same thing is coming to the 2-year sector. And no, this isn't just your academic associate degrees. This is your applied associate degrees as well. Obviously, for things like nursing, nursing has licensing accreditation requirements, and licensing and accreditation requirements are always a compelling academic reason, provided that you can actually draw the connection, right? In other words, you can't just say, oh, well, nurses have to be licensed, so we got to have 72 hours. Okay, well, we need a little more than that. You need to draw a line between what the, say, Board of Nursing requires and how your courses map over to that kind of thing. HB 842 requires school districts to provide courses that satisfy a requirement for industry-recognized credential, certificate, or an associate degree concurrently with the student's high school diploma, and the course must also satisfy requirements to accord the student's high school diploma. So we're still trying to figure out exactly what they were talking about here, but it sounds a lot like requirement to provide dual credit is what it looks like. And of course, we had something like this before. You remember with Education Code 28.008, I think it is, that requires you to provide at least, that requires the high schools actually, to provide at least 12 hours of advanced coursework. But that wasn't specified as dual credit. That could also be International Baccalaureate or AP or some other things. This one seems more specific. SB 498 reduces the number of total semester credit hours that initiate the reverse transfer process. Right now, it's been 90, and so if a student is, at Brazosport and they transfer to A&M Corpus, and they transfer, say, maybe with just 45 hours. But once they double that and they hit 90 at David's institution, then the senior institution is supposed to send a transcript back to the 2-year institution and see if it's possible to grant that associate degree. Well, now that threshold is going to go from 90 to 66. That seems pretty tight to me. I mean, obviously 66 is enough, but really just barely enough to have earned an associate degree. It seems to me a lot more likely that a student with 90 credits could arrange those credits to create an associate degree. It may not be the case, or certainly in all cases, that students with 66 hours could similarly construct an associate degree out of that. But maybe. We'll see how this works in practice. It certainly doesn't forbid the senior institution from sending a transcript again later if the first time the student doesn't have enough credits to earn the associate degree. So we may, as a higher education community, we may need to figure out if this move down to 66 then suggests that we need to perhaps suggest some voluntary policy of following up at a later point for those students that didn't have the credits or the right credits to form that associate degree. No, this one actually took me by surprise. Linda, do you happen to know any background on this that take you by surprise too? Yeah, I had no telegraphing of this. This just kind of popped up all of a sudden and went through. So I'm sorry, I really don't know the background on it. Okay, HB 31. This is also going to be a big thing, particularly for our two-year colleges, but also for any senior institution that does a significant amount of dual credit. Limits fundings to institutions of higher education for basically hours attempted by students in high school, i.e. dual credit, except for your early college high schools. Except for those. So note that. Limits those students well, limits you, the institution, limits your funding to semester credit hours in core curriculum, foreign language, and those are the two academic parts. So academic dual credit should fit into your core curriculum, or it should be a foreign language course. Nothing else. Nothing else is going to get funded. For CTE, it should be a CTE course that leads to a certificate or associate degree. And so we're working now to, of course, to work all, not just this, but other things into our rules and try to get this implemented, because a lot of these things have a September 1st implementation date, so we've really been hopping on it this month trying to get rules written and through our approval process. SB 62, and this is basically some modifications to the meningitis. And I'll remind you that Donna Carlin is our staff member that heads up the meningitis effort. So if you have any questions about this, I'll just preemptively direct you to her because she is the guru on this, and I probably wouldn't be able to answer your questions. But she can. SB 62 amends the section of the Education Code, lower that exemption from 30 to 22. So that's going to allow a lot more students to qualify for that exemption. Creates a new secure internet-based process to be developed by DSHS and used at junior colleges that elect to use it, basically for students that decline the vaccine for whatever reason. Eliminates our form. We went to a lot of trouble to develop this form, but now we don't get to keep it. So I believe we have to go back to using the Health and Human Services form. And finally, this becomes effective not this coming fall, but the next. And then on to our sunset bill. This had a lot of changes in it. We spent quite a bit of time poring over this in various stages of completeness and then poring over it again after it got passed. So there's some stuff about program approval. We now have 1 year to complete the review of any new program request, or it automatically becomes approved if the clock runs out. That's tough, but doable. We can handle. That's a little tough, perhaps occasionally for the doctoral programs, but for most other programs, that's really no problem at all. The next one is actually tougher on us, I think, or could be proved to be tougher on us. We must determine any new application that you make. We must determine if it's complete within 5 working days. And some of the time that's not going to be a problem, but other times, like now when we're a little bit short-staffed and we're busy, cleaning up after the legislative session and writing rules, we have a lot of other activities going on. Luckily, this is a time of year when we get relatively fewer programmatic requests, because if we got inundated like we often do in the early fall and early spring, we'd have a real problem keeping up right now because, again, we're a few people short. So we'll have to reorganize some of our receiving and assigning processes to account for this. And probably the biggest change, we lost our authority to order the closure or consolidation of low-producing programs. Not just low-producing, we lost our authority to order the closure or consolidation of programs. We can now only recommend to you, the institutions, that you close programs and recommend to your governing boards that they close the programs. But we can no longer order such activities. So as a result, we are going to be, again, another set of rules that we're rewriting are the low producing program rules, and that's basically going to be radically streamlined. And until the board approves those changes, I can't tell you exactly what they're going to be, but it's probably going to be something like we send you a list each year. So, which we do right now, but we have this whole appeal process, both a staff appeal process and then a board appeal process if you don't get the results you want through the staff process. But now it's just going to be, we send you a list, here's all your programs, here's which ones are low producing, here's which ones are in the yellow and could become low producing. Take the actions that you think are appropriate. And I'll have more details for you on that, I would imagine, at our fall meeting after the board has already taken its action and we know what final form the board has approved those rules in. But that's at least a preview of how it's likely to go. And finally, it was also included in here that there was some things about common courses, and you folks at the four-year institutions almost got put into the Texas Common Course numbering system. But that was taken out very, very late in the session. So now there's some softer language in there. You folks at the universities report your course inventories to us each year. Tell us, I believe what you are going to be teaching. David, do you know, is it prospective or is it retrospective? This is done by the Planning and Accountability Division, so I'm not quite as familiar with the process. That's my intuition too. So now, in addition to tell us what courses you plan to teach over the next year, you've got to identify the Common Course number equivalents. So for instance, if you're going to stop teaching a course that has a Common Course numbering equivalent, you have to tell us which ones those are and what those equivalents are. Or if you're adding something new and that's going to have a Common Course numbering system equivalent, you've got to tell us about that. So basically, it's a little more tracking of university offering of courses that have equivalents in the Texas Common Course numbering system. Another thing that's changing, even though this isn't a legislative change from this session, but I wanted to mention, is the new TSI exam is going to be implemented the first day of this coming fall semester, which I imagine you've all been planning for a good deal already. So again, just to hit the highlights, this is going to be a much more detailed diagnostic exam, should allow for better sorting of students, which is particularly a critical issue for some of our community colleges. They've got a lot of students coming in with really low math skills, a lot of times really low English reading, writing, and speaking skills. So low, in fact, that many times the college's feeling is that these students really ought to be in adult basic education because they're hardly literate or really not even literate, fully literate in English, and it's a ability to benefit question, right? You don't want to put someone in college level courses if they're at the high school level. That's why we have developmental ed. But by the same token, you don't want to put someone in high school level courses if they're functioning at a grade school level. That's really adult basic education. So this exam is intended and designed to help address some of that situation and allow perhaps some better sorting of students into those instructional realms that will best suit their current needs. And here we've got, I just want to list the contact information. This is headed by our P16 division, and Dr. Suzanne Morales-Vale is available if you have questions. There's her contact information. And I think, that is just about it. Just to kind of give you a rundown, again, because we've had some changes in personnel, and I wanted you to know who to go to for questions. Rebecca Leslie is now running the ACGM and answering Common Course numbering system questions from a coordinating board perspective. Andrew Lofters is taking care of dual credit and early college high schools. Dwayne Hiller is doing that undergraduate existing program review system. Core curriculum is our own Melinda. TSI, Dr. Morales-Vale. Bacterial meningitis, Donna Carlin. Workforce issues, our new Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Gary Tomerlin. Distance Ed is another one of our new staffers, Judith Sebesta, who came to us from Lamar University. And for general academic affairs questions, about transfer or other general issues not addressed above, come to me. And that is it.
Does anyone have any questions for James or discussion about the various legislative initiatives?
And this presentation be provided to us through email?
You asked for the presentation through email?
We can do that.
Yes, we'll go ahead and send it to all of you. Yes, certainly.
Thank you. I was going to ask for that also. It went by kind of fast. Any other questions or concerns? Or
One quick question on House Bill 31. Is that one that becomes effective in September as well?
We'll have to check on that. I don't.
That's the limiting of dual credit funding to the core.
Oh, yes. Actually, I do know that. Yes.
That's September.
That's one of the reasons. Sorry. Yes, that's one of the reasons we have to jump on this and put that into emergency rules. Is I believe that is effective for this fall semester. I'll double check that.
Thank you.
any other concerns, questions? And I guess we're ready to move on to the discussion of the development of recommended area discipline tracks for the new core curriculum. We had a special subcommittee consider this earlier in the year, I guess it was in March, and want to thank all those who took part in that, and some were very active. Larry, Terry, and Fred wrote up the first page. Donna did the business and economics track suggestion, and Stephen, the health sciences. Stephen isn't here today, I don't think, and the science and engineering. I would like to have Fred present this for us and discuss it a little bit, and then get your reactions. Fred?
Well, ominous, I'm the only one of the three that's left. We were asked by the UEAC last time to take a look at recommending tracks for different disciplines so that students didn't know what their major was going to be, started the core curriculum and would complete so many hours and find out later that they needed a math course or a science course or something like that. So a subcommittee met on March 29th. There were 5 representatives from the 4-year colleges and 4 representatives from 2-year colleges, 2 coordinating board members, and a couple of observers. And we did it, first of all, was take a look at all the different disciplines. And we want to make sure that we include all the disciplines, and then examine the general core and ask the questions, what unique requirements would a student need in any one of those particular disciplines that if they missed it, they would not be able to, they'd have to go back and complete and pick up additional hours that they didn't need. After a lot of discussion and review, we realized there really was only 3 major areas where there would really be any concern, and those are listed on the, those are the 3 areas, business economics, health careers, and then science and engineering. The reason for that is there's enough choices under the core that a student, for instance, in humanities or the arts or something like that, could take courses within the core and they wouldn't get that far behind. But in the sciences, math and science course choices would have a huge impact on their success later on. Specifically on the science side, if they took a non-majors biology course, which is an option, or a non-majors physics course, and then they wanted to become a physicist or an engineer, they would be already behind the curve. Same thing in the math area. It was discussed that all the math and all the science and engineering tracks really required calculus, or at least that rigor. And for a student to just take contemporary math or something like that and then find out they needed especially in the engineering area, they'd be way behind. So that was on the science and engineering side, the two areas that we thought was we needed to address with students. Under business economics, another one was economics, because again, under social behavioral, they had the option of taking courses other than economics. But if they were going to study business or economics, they needed economics. So we need to make sure that they signed up for those, as well as math. Making sure they took a business math and our business math courses if they were going the business route. Under health careers, that was the third area that we thought would need special attention. Again, in health careers, it would be under the sciences, making sure that they took science courses that would lead to health career type discipline. And we identified what we thought those would be, specifically anatomy and physiology and general chemistry. On the math side, it was important that they had at least either statistics or college algebra to have the right rigor to be able to move into those particular areas. Again, this was discussed between the 4 years and the 2 years. From a 2-year perspective, what courses do we recommend for students going in the 4 years? 4 years saying, what do we really need students to be prepared for as they come forward? So we came, based upon that, we came up with this recommendation to provide to students. Again, it's a recommendation to students. The first page is pretty much covers what is the core and why the core is important to a student. This would be a student who would be new to college or maybe in the high school looking at college, or for parents looking at it, trying to make a decision what they wanted to do if they were undecided or if they had some decision. Brief explanation of what the core is and how it impacts their education. And then we gave specific recommendations to students, and depending on which of those three particular areas they were going, so they would have better ideas as they planned or prepared. It doesn't hurt a student, for instance, going in the humanities if they thought that they want to be a scientist and they took physics but then decided to go into humanities, they're still on track. That's not a problem. But if they were going to humanities, didn't take the science course, then they transfer the science, then they would be behind. So that's how we came up. And we also agreed these would be recommendations instead of specific requirements, so that this would be a tool so a student could make better decisions, more informed decisions to the process. That's a quick summary, Mr. Chairman. Any questions?
I have a question. In terms of how this material would be presented to students, did you picture it somewhat like it is here, that there would be like a little narrative section followed by a little chart showing the area and the courses?
Yes, that was the intent. And actually, we'd even talked about putting a couple links in there to help. This would be a guide for students to be available. I don't know if we fully decided where it would go, but it would be something that would be available to students that would be looking to apply to college, possibly on a college site or in materials going out, or on the coordinating board for students looking to make some decisions.
Right. I imagine that's something we can discuss a little bit later in next steps. Did you consider, particularly I'm thinking for the health careers and the science and engineering, adding some sort of general statement to the narrative, something to the effect of, students pursuing these fields should not take non-major science courses? I'm particularly thinking of just how common it is for students not to really pay attention, and they take the non-majors biology or the non-majors physics or something like that. Did you consider that?
Yes, actually, on the first page, the last paragraph actually addresses the fact that there are specific courses that we would recommend students to consider in particular areas. And then under each recommendation, we had for instance, under science, we had mentioned study requires more rigorous science and engineering. For instance, I'm looking at bullet 3. Science engineering core curriculum is recommended for students interested in life sciences, and then the recommendations. I think we had talked about footnotes, possibly even further emphasizing if that need, but those were points where we put it in there so that may bring it to their attention.
Okay, thank you.
There was a particular concern for the science and engineering track, and so if you'll look below that last table, there are a series of footnotes that really try to recommend that students work with academic advisors and to be aware of the degree requirements should they plan to transfer to a four-year institution, that they are taking courses that do apply to the degree plan.
Thank you, Ann. Ann was one of our members of our committee. We tried to put throughout this, and what she says is making sure that even though this is a recommendation, and this is our recommendation, that students still always check with advisors. It's always important. Thanks.
Can this be something that it's included in the package for incoming students as freshmen? That way, I know we receive a lot of paperwork, we talk to so many people, but just have either one person in academics to let us know, or as you were mentioning, maybe having it possibly on a website with links, or even if it's included on a paperwork, just big bold letters saying, if you're interested in taking or majoring in these areas, this is what we recommend. So just having it in different places, not just with academics or just with online links. So I would recommend to have it definitely different places, just for the student to see it over and over. That way it can retain, and they can go to different places or talk to different people, and if they have any questions, they can always refer back to it.
Thanks.
Well, that's sort of getting into the next steps discussion in some ways, but I think those are really good suggestions. Does anybody else have suggestions for how we might use this? We also have, in terms of next steps, James has some jobs to do in terms of the coordinating board itself. But our first steps, I guess, would be to approve it. And so before we get any further ahead of ourselves, while you're thinking about how we might disseminate it, is there any change in specifically in this document, change in language, further emphases that you would like to add before we consider approval?
Just one little point in note-keeping on the health careers. We have the math courses, Math 1314 is college algebra, and on the science and engineering, we have college algebra as 1315. If we could, I guess, go with Common Core consistency with 1314, I believe.
That's correct. Good catch.
Good catch. Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lemoyne, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs at the UT system. I just have a couple of questions about the science and engineering track. I have a hard time reconciling the math suggestions if this were to go to undergraduates at a university. I don't know of any baccalaureate programs in science and engineering that require college algebra.
The answer to that, if I can, is we recognize that too, the calculus. The thing is, at the community college level, we have a lot of students who come in who barely do the college algebra. And so college algebra would be, in many cases, a core. So we recognize that there would be there'd need to be a continuation towards the calculus, and calculus is the ultimate. That's why calculus is listed. But we also listed college algebra, recognizing, again, the community college environment.
I totally understand. I just think maybe you need to have a discussion about how to reconcile what takes place at a community college versus what takes place at a university and what is required of baccalaureate programs in certain disciplines.
I think they've had that discussion, and the whole idea is that if they're ready for college, for calculus, they would immediately go into calculus, and that would be accounted as part of their core. But if they do not, from the TSI, test into being able to do calculus, then the college algebra will suffice for the core. By the time they leave that to your college, they may have changed their major, but their college algebra would still count as their core.
Right, but what we're looking at here, I mean, we know that a lot of them change their majors, and to go back to Kevin's point, I mean, if they're going into engineering and they're not calculus ready, they're behind. So isn't that the point of the recommendations, so that they don't take college algebra sort of by mistake, right?
Well, but a student may aspire to engineering but not be calculus ready as they come into college. And so the intent here was to provide information that would get the student into the correct track for mathematics so that they would have the opportunity to gain the foundational knowledge that they need to be able to move forward in that degree program.
Right, okay.
Now, granted, a student who is not ready for college, I mean, certainly for pre-calculus coming into college, is perhaps going to find getting prepared to go into engineering to be a daunting process. And we tried to address this. I think really, I see this, speaking from a four-year perspective, I find this tool to probably be a little bit more useful for students who are coming into a two-year junior college situation and looking to transfer into a four-year university. Students who are coming into Texas A&M as first-time freshmen, first-time students, we're going to put them straight into a degree track, and they're going to know specifically what classes they need to take. And so the information that's provided here is not going to be of such rich usefulness for us. But for a student who is entering into a community college with intent of transferring to Texas A&M, I think that this could be very valuable to at least get them into the right track so that they start working towards getting the foundational knowledge that they need.
Right, and I guess, I mean, obviously they can always take college algebra, but I'm just, the thought in my mind is about the message that it sends. So if we have a student who's coming in and they're not ready for pre-cal, we can say, well, you can still get there. It's going to take you longer.
We put a footnote at the bottom of that many STEM programs require calculus. And perhaps that's something that needs to be stressed a little bit more in the preamble language that's in this section or something like that. Perhaps that message is not as strong in this section as it ought to be.
Right.
And I could see that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd also like to voice a comment on that. I think maybe the way we look at it at the university setting is if they don't have a clear understanding of that, those courses are not on our degree plans. So those courses go towards excess hours. So the clearer the students understand that, the clearer they have a sense of what do I need to be prepared for. And just because I'm core complete, you're core complete and you're transferring that to university core complete, but then it's a whole nother explanation of, but you haven't met the prerequisites. And they don't understand why that college algebra or that pre-calculus is not on the degree plan if I'm core complete. So I think that's sometimes where the discussion is difficult for students to understand.
At the same time, I know how many people start off wanting to be engineers or biologists or physicists and get their first semester and say, you know, I really want arts or humanities or journalism or something. And the idea, again, is the calculus is stated there, and I agree with Ann. Maybe we could highlight it more and put a bigger emphasis saying that, we could do that. But at the same time, if a student doesn't know, they think they're interested in engineering, they're behind in the math, they know they have to do the sequence towards calculus, but they can work at least the college algebra to meet the needs and then keep working that way. Or our big concern was someone starting at getting in contemporary math, then deciding they want to be an engineer, and that's not going to work because then they're way behind.
One recommendation that I have is that instead of it being a footnote in terms of asking students to be advised, that be kind of maybe the first statement that we make, because I think that's the critical point is.
That would probably be best under 3, science and engineering. We could actually put a statement right there stating it very clearly that, be aware that calculus is the ultimate goal in most of these fields. And so even though this might be a course, this is the direction you'll have to be.
And maybe it's not the ultimate goal. It's the first math course required on degree plans for these fields, for some of them. Yes, it's a starting point, not the ultimate.
For you folks that are much more familiar with the curricula of these areas, many STEM programs require Calculus 1. Don't virtually all of them require Calculus 1? I mean, can you name a STEM field that doesn't require calculus?
There are some technology fields that rely more on business math and things like that, but a student who goes calculus track will still get a good preparation to go into those fields.
Right. So yeah, this does sound like people tend to agree that particular statement could be strengthened, huh?
I think so.
Fleshed out a little more. Great.
I'm wondering if instead of saying that many programs require Calculus 1 if it says Calculus level skills, because like y'all were saying, that's often the first course, and they, for an engineering program, and they'll have to have higher level math skills. So they would have to have Calculus level skills, and then they'd be going beyond that for that degree program. Is that?
Maybe it could be stated that Calculus 1 is the foundational course for further math work in these STEM fields, something like that, that it's actually calculus that's the foundation, not college algebra.
Could you do it in a reverse way and put Calculus 1, and then instead of saying many STEM programs require Calculus 1, make your footnotes state that all students in the STEM fields require students to enter into the calculus math track, so that it's clear that the first goal is Calculus 1, and if you can't meet that, then you need to go through these other paths to get there, as opposed to a student who might look at this and say, okay, well, I have to take calculus. Well, maybe I'll take pre-cal just, to get ready, or a statement that says that students in the STEM field should enroll in the highest math for which they test ready. And that would add more clarity.
I think that how much of this did you get, Melinda?
I was just about to say, I almost cut you off. I'm making notes of any and all, and of course I'll review the webcast to ensure accuracy. And maybe we can merge these together. I'll put the actual statements made, of course, and some suggestions of merging. Again, making footnotes, statements like was said earlier, and continuing footnotes, maybe adding a fourth one, and shoot those out to you and see what we can get after I've merged them for us. Very great ideas, great, and please keep them coming if you have any more, any and all suggestions for modifications, because we do want to, like it says here on your agenda, approve, again, with possible modifications, this work so that we can continue our discussion on next tracks, or next steps, excuse me.
Well, I think that if we have a agreement, I think we can approve the concept of the recommendations, and then with suggested modifications, and there may be more. And then if you can work those up later in the meeting, we can return to them, and so that everybody approves, we have precise language. Sound like a plan? Yes, sir.
Changing gears slightly, but staying on the science and engineering track, all of the science courses are listed here as 1,400 numbers, the lecture lab component series. Yet with the new Common Core, we're being requested to go to a 6-hour, therefore many schools are going to a 3-hour lecture, separate 1-hour independent lab. Would that numbering sequence possibly confuse students if we give them this 4-hour series option?
I would defer that to the four-year colleges about what you would accept and what you wouldn't accept. I mean, that's the whole thing. I think the discussion was you wanted the lab sciences. That's why it's in there. But
the laboratories would be an expectation. How it's packaged in the numbering, whether it's packaged as a unit in a 4-semester course or 4-credit course, or whether it comes in separately as a 3-hour with a 1-hour lab, we're fine either way as long as it's the science major equivalency. And so it could be that we just strengthen or put in sub-columns that show the different types of packaging options that might be available within the core curriculum.
That's what I was leading toward, is that we should indicate the other options, considering even some of the 4 years are looking to switch to a 3-in-1 numbering series. And if this is for high school students in the process of just going to college, they really need things to be as clear and straightforward as possible so they don't get confused as to, this course isn't being offered, I can't possibly go this track. We want to make sure they don't get that sort of discouragement.
Could we dig into that a little bit further? Because I'm curious about how four-year institutions feel about bundled science courses where the lecture and the lab are bundled together. So at TCCIA, we talked about 3- and 4-hour science courses, and some colleges are having a challenge getting the hours in those courses to fit into the various component area slots. Because if you have a 4-hour course, there's really, that's going to be a mismatch in most cases, because there's 6 hours now in the sciences area, which means then student takes 2 courses, they're going to have 2 hours of lab left over. Big discussion over what are we going to do with that? Are we going to put those into that component area option, what is now called the institutionally designated option, or are we going to put those into simply degree requirements? And colleges, there's just a general discussion about that. Colleges aren't quite sure what they're going to do. So one request that they've made of us, the coordinating board, is that we make available in the ACGM some integrated 3-hour course options, where you'd simply take a 3-hour course and you'd expand the contact hour range for it. University folks, remember that unlike you guys, the 2-year institutions are not funded on credit hours. They're funded on contact hours. So even though it might be a 3-hour course, it might have 48 contact hours, it might have 64 contact hours, it might have 80 contact hours, it might have 112 contact hours. So you can see that you could fit a lot of instruction into that 3-hour course, and that 3-hour course could actually vary widely in terms of how much content it has based on the number of contact hours. So my question to you, Ann, and to other folks here from the 4-year institutions, would you cast a jaundiced eye upon a 3-hour course like that had the lab built into it, it had a lot of contact hours, or as you suggested or perhaps implied in an earlier statement, are you simply concerned that the student has the lab, has the appropriate experiences and instruction, and you don't really care how many hours happen to be bundled into the course? And I ask in advance because this is something that's going to come to the ACGM Advisory Committee probably either the end of the summer or during the fall meeting, and I'd like to have some sense in advance of how 4-year institutions would react to such a proposal.
And I'm not sure that I've got a really sound answer for you. We have both models on our campus. We do stay pretty true to the 45-hour lecture for a 3-hour lecture and the 2 to 3 hour equivalent for a 1 credit hour laboratory. We have many departments that bundle the laboratory and the lecture section together, but it's a 4-hour credit hour course. Where it's separate, we are still using the 3-hour lecture with a tag-along 1-hour laboratory. And so if a 2-year school were to look at doing something where a 3-hour credit hour course included both the laboratory section or the laboratory content and the lecture content, we would struggle with how to appropriately credit that student with what we're still seeing as that 1 credit hour laboratory experience, whether it's freestanding or whether it's bundled into something that we see as a 4-hour course. And so that would be a difficult thing. What we might wind up doing is giving credit for the laboratory experience, but then the student would still potentially have 1 hour of science that we're not necessarily recognizing because they didn't have that 4-hour equivalency for the package, if that makes sense.
In short, we don't know the answer to that question. Is that what we've arrived at? I don't either.
Just to add to that, when we transfer in credits, we transfer in the credit hours. Even though we may give them credit for a particular course, the number of credits that come in stays the same. So that may cause a problem with those students that are right on track. That when they come to complete their degree, the number of credits is different than what they need. It may be helpful if they're interested in taking more intensive work and using that in that core optional area. It may give them a little bit more flexibility in that. But when the credit comes in, it stays the same. We don't bump them up to 4 credits when they have a 3-credit course.
Sure. So in my theoretical example, a student might come to you core complete, having taken all their science and everything else they needed, but they still might need a couple of extra just hours to fill out the degree plan. Right. Okay.
That kind of ties into the idea of the separation of core and degree requirements, where a lot of schools are putting in specific degree requirements for the 4-year programs, which accommodate and deal with the 4-hour lecture lab component. And therefore, a student who does a effective 2-hour, 1-hour lab combined 3-credit hour total package would effectively be an hour short and therefore require an additional course or at least an additional hour to make up that degree requirement needed in the sciences.
Hi, Jenny Kennedy from the UNT system. I was just thinking about health careers, not for myself or any of us, but just in the track. And one thing I was noticing is it talks about transferring, but most of these programs aren't programs we offer at the 4-year level. Like, for example, pharmacy tech, EMT, dental hygienist, that sort of thing. So I'm wondering if there might need to be 2 separate kind of health career preparatory programs, one for students who are interested in upper level nursing, dentistry, medical education, that sort of thing. And then these, which tend to be a little more community college focused because most of us don't offer them.
I think that's a good suggestion, actually.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion because in many cases, the students pursuing those applied programs at the 2-year institutions, transfer may not even be a possibility for them because it's a 1-year, 2-year certificate or something like that. It's not even designed to transfer anywhere.
And I think along with that, many times we have students who come in confused thinking that for occupational therapy, that's a bachelor's degree. So I'm going to have a bachelor's degree in occupational therapy because I got my associate's degree in a occupational therapy assistant. So there's some confusion. So if we tie all those together, it confuses students rather than helping them.
The intent, the way it was built, was to actually, the reason we put examples was more to help a student who didn't know that they wanted health careers, they wanted something else. So the examples are really just to give students some ideas of what they're looking at. And I think that's what you might be addressing. We were looking more at the fact is any type of health careers from a transfer side. Actually, I think we looked all the way at vets and doctors and nurses and all the rest would want some sort of anatomy, physiology, and chemistry to make sure they had those. The other sciences could work. We talked about different tracks that veterinarians could go and nurses could go, but they would at least need these basics. And from a math side, recognizing that there might be some differences there, but they would need at least a college-level math course or a statistics course. So again,
none of these examples are programs that are offered at universities as baccalaureate degrees. None of them.
Okay, and again, the examples can be taken out. The examples were just meant to help a student trying to figure out in the transfer what they wanted to do. They were kind of extras that were meant to be helpful, but if they're confusing, can be taken out. The examples were, again, a guide.
Would your recommendation be that the examples be taken out or simply substituted with other examples, or what's the best course from your point of view?
From where I sit, I just think we're kind of talking about 2 separate health issues. I think students who are interested in being EMTs or other kind of techs definitely, actually probably might not even need the 2 kinds of chemistries, as opposed to students who are looking at more advanced programs. So I just think it might be 2 separate issues, but that's just sort of a off-the-wall thought this morning.
I'm going to take a step on the wild side. I'd say an EMT tech would probably not look at this because they're probably looking at a 2-year degree and and that's what they're ending. The intent was for for those looking to transfer into a 4-year program. So we were thinking 4-year programs, we put this together. So again, the examples might be misleading, but anything that was a 1-year certificate or a 2-year AAS degree was not meant to be included in this category. These are people looking to go to a 4-year plan, that they want to pick up a bachelor's in whatever, or go on to be a vet or a doctor. What type of guidance could we give them in that process? So again, we could pull that, anything that's in the workforce side, we could pull that out altogether, the examples.
I have a question. Sheila and I have a question. Health careers at a 4-year institution, are they not also STEM fields? All of them?
They are. I do know that we had a lot of discussion in the subcommittee, and there was a feeling at one time we were going to put them all under STEM. But then there was a feeling in the group that, wait, there are still some areas that might be unique to health careers that would not fit within STEM, which is the reason we came up with the second category, or this second category.
Their needs may be unique if you have med school in mind or vet school in mind versus engineering.
And we also thought that there was a difference in the course pattern that they might take.
Right.
The mathematics required for our BS in nursing at the A&M Health Science Center is different than what we would see for a student who wanted to major in biology.
Right.
And so we thought that because there was a difference in the foundational courses, that it justified having a separate track for the health sciences.
Right. My suggestion is that the examples that are here need to go, and then probably be replaced with something else, or just omitted because, well, we have examples, a few above accounting, economics.
Possible examples, if I may suggest, would be nursing, because not RN or LVN, but just nursing. We could put in a pre-vet, pre-med. I think that's the concept. I'm trying to think of some others, but those would be the ones I would think that we would put in there to make it clear that that's what we're looking at. We're not considering all these others.
Well, one other thing I just wanted to note is how, I'm sorry. Oh, one other thing I wanted to note is that, for example, nursing programs typically only require 1 chemistry. So here, if we're asking them to take 2 chemistries, they're over-chemistried if they wanted to go into nursing. Whereas if they want to be, a physician, they would need those 2. So I'm just wondering if we might want to consider looking at that as well.
We could. Again, we emphasize the fact to all of these that you want to see an advisor, because there is no perfect track. I think that anybody want to be in nursing is probably are going to be looking, at least by the first semester, they can at least A chemistry. So we were probably put a more emphasis on make sure you see your advisor, because we were trying to do is catch those students who didn't know what they wanted, and help direct them or guide them until they found an advisor or until they were on their track. So I hear what you're saying, and that is true, and I'm just concerned that to make it too specific, because it was not, we as a group decided we didn't want to make it too specific. We want to make it general enough that a student could make choices, but not so general that they would take a course that wouldn't count for them, and they'd end up with having to take another course later on in the process.
But don't you think when you're grouping these disciplines in this broad way, that if you're going to recommend courses, they have to be common across those the disciplines within this broad category? And chemistry, too, wouldn't be common in all the health professions, for example.
That's fine. Again, I deferred to the 4 years because we were trying to find something that we could help students be entering a 4-year or a 2-year, that they could transfer and make sure that they were still on path.
And I think in addition to that, if you look at pre-med, if a student said, okay, they said anatomy and chemistry, I would go into the university setting, and they're saying you're behind a year because you should have taken the general biology as a prerequisite for the next step. So that's, again, what we've been talking about. We have to be, maybe if we do some kind of categorizing in the health fields, we have to say those on track for professional degrees beyond a bachelor's degree. You may have to divide up the tracking somehow for those, because if a student comes in for anatomy, that puts them behind. And so we have to be very careful, I think, when we make recommendations like that and lump together nursing and pre-med, pre-op, pre-dent, all those.
That's another concern that we would have, because if anything that we would recommend a pre-med major through at UTD would require calculus. So to tell them to take college algebra would set them really far behind, because almost every STEM degree, well, actually every STEM degree we have requires calculus.
Let me ask you a question. Based upon our discussions under science engineering, would we just want to group under science engineering the pre-meds and pre-vets and then leave this category for the health careers?
I think what was said earlier about students in STEM fields, and then you might want to say in certain health science fields, should enroll in the highest level math course in which they test ready. Because that's the idea, is they should only be taking algebra if that's where they tested. If they're interested in those fields, if they tested higher than algebra, absolutely they should be in the calculus. And I think you said that earlier that way, and that made a lot of sense. I think that was good.
Maybe there needs to be a fourth category. Instead of lumping it together with the science and engineering, the STEM programs, because you could have pre-professional medical field majors, because then that's an easier recommendation area, and then health careers, I don't know how you want to state it, but you might need a fourth category specifically for the pre-professional medical fields.
And pre-professional medical then would differ from the science and engineering how?
The physics you take may be different. Having geology and in there, just, okay, where's that coming from? So it's focused on what do they need for medical school, what do they need as the prerequisites to get them into those programs that they're looking to get into. It's still very difficult because what you need for physical therapy may be different than what you need for medical school, which may be different than what you need for dental or pre-vet. So I think having it's hard to make blanket recommendations, I think, across the board. That's where we're having our difficulty.
I agree. I think it's hard to do that, but I think what's missing from this discussion is going back to the importance of advising. Mm-hmm. This should not be a document that's used to prescribe in all of the different ways students would look at this and then on their own decide, I'm going to take these classes. The importance of advising is critical in all of these areas. So students would be meeting with an advisor who is well informed of what is needed when they transfer to a four-year university. So, they would not just simply look at this and say, I'm going to go ahead and take General Chem 1 and 2 if it's not needed.
I think the difficulty comes in if we say we're going to give this to high school students. How are we informing high school counselors? What we're running into with dual credit, we're having more and more students that are getting into these courses, completing the core, that don't have someone as an advisor that sits with them. And so that's where our concern is, that they get on tracks, that they don't have the advisor with them. Sometimes in the community colleges, those that are at risk are getting the advising that they need, but those who are doing well are not able, because of the population, the number of students who are going through those programs. So the clearer I think we can be in this, I think it's more helpful for students. And I agree with you. I think the best of the world is when they can have advisors sitting with them. Many times people are making choices when they aren't there.
Do you think that the specificity of, and I guess I'm addressing this to Linda's comment, but the specificity of the tables in here invite students to just go off on their own without advising, and that if we describe things, emphasize the importance of some of these requirements in various areas, and fold that in with, your advisor will be able to direct you in specific courses and so on and so forth. Is that a better solution or not?
I'm just concerned that we're putting something together that might be trying to replace the need for, not necessarily replace the need for advising, but the onus of the responsibility should be on the institution to provide holistic advising. That's the goal. When James was talking about the new TSI assessment, there are mandates in there now that talk about pre-assessment activities and required advising. This should be a part of that.
Furthermore, this was just recommendation. It was not meant to be prescriptive. I mean, and this was supposed to be something as a help in the process. Can we ask our student here, would you be confused as a student looking at this and thinking, well, gee whiz, I need to take geology if I want to be a pre-med major? Or, I mean, does this help you with tables, or what would be more helpful?
I think as a general guidance, it's having something to refer to and have an idea of what I should take. But I definitely agree with both of the ladies that the advisors should be highly involved, starting from the high school level. I know some schools, the advisors are more of like concern of making sure that the student completes their requirements to graduate high school. However, they're not so much advising in the progression of continuing in college. So if we can have them have this to guide their students, that way students can have a better idea. But I definitely agree that they need more of a supervision or more of a guidance from the advisor, not just go off on their own registering. And I know a lot of the schools require freshmen to go through an advisor, not just register on their own. Sometimes they're not allowed to register online. They have to go through the advising, and they might have a hold on it. So that kind of like forces them to go to the advisor, but at the same time to receive the guidance that they definitely do need.
If I may make a comment, it also seems like there are two separate issues, which is it a guide just to give you a sense for preparation, which is you didn't test, you need to go to pre-algebra, versus this is a tool to figure out what credits to get ahead, right? Because it sounds like at a 4-year level, that's not going to help you to say, oh, I took economics or I took algebra. You're not ready for the 4-year, but you are prepared. And so tweaking it to focus on the skills, perhaps, to say this is a guide for students, this is making sense to how to be prepared or what you need to do at the 2-year to get ready for the 4-year, versus saying that credit absolutely is going to get you into that program. Because if it's phrased in the latter way, it's a little deceptive. I mean, for students to say, I looked at the table, I checked it off, I'm good, why can't I be an engineering major or a STEM major? It seems that there's maybe just changing the wording so it's a preparation guide, it's a skills-based guide or something, so they realize this is not about a credit tool to say this credit is going to be accepted there and then therefore you're that major. So if it can be, I don't know, maybe revised to bring in some of that clarity.
How would you do that? Because that was exactly the intent of the committee. Mm-hmm. That's the recommendations the committee made. This would just be exactly as you say, a guide, a tool. To get them thinking, but not be prescriptive. Because there's no way, I mean, one of the things we found out in the community, there's no way we could identify what every 4-year college was going to take, because each one varied on what they took. So consequently, we realized we couldn't come up with a prescriptive. But what type of wording would we put in there, I guess, even in the title possibly, that we could make it clear that this is meant to guide you and make you start thinking about this, to help you, and then big words and maybe in italics, see an advisor somewhere built into that so that it can meet that purpose. Again, it's not meant to be the prescriptive tool that if you get this, your degree is given, because we know that's not going to happen.
I wonder if the fact that you put courses with numbers, if that made it more prescriptive. Because I know from working with students who are coming into a 4-year institution, they said, this is the course they said on this chart. Whereas if we said principles of macroeconomics, or if we said anatomy and physiology, something that was more generalized, that forces them to talk with somebody. Whereas if we give them an actual course number, sometimes they think, okay, that's my advice of what to take, whereas if we're more generalized, that might be helpful.
And I don't need to see an advisor because I just have this piece of paper. That's my fear. And at the top of the second page, specific core recommendations, and then the specific courses are listed. Sounds like we're recommending you take these courses.
I would definitely do not include recommended. I would call it more of a guide or guidance to courses or guidance to specific disciplines. That way they are right there. It states that it's a guide. It's not a recommendation or something that you must take. And I definitely agree that the course gives the freedom to the student to just go and register for that specific course and not necessarily knowing if it's really the one that they might be needing in the future or not.
I have a basic question. What problem are you trying to solve here? Because at my institution, my catalog says for engineering, it's a community college, for engineering, this is what we suggest you take. It's this. And we're already saying that in our catalogs. At the institution I worked at last year, the same thing was the case. And university, I mean, that's the case. My understanding is that's the case everywhere we are. Today, I can't hear out of my right ear because I have swimmer's ear for my vacation. Glad to have a vacation. But because I can't hear people when they talk to me and I can't hear, they yell louder. So are we just yelling louder here? Or are we really solving a problem? I mean, so if we know what the problem is, then we can work towards a solution. Because students already have the advice through my catalog. Why do we think they'll read this if we put a link to something else? It's just, I'm not being critical. I'm just asking, what is our problem?
And on the one hand, we're trying to provide more information, and on the other hand, we're saying, let's provide less information. That doesn't make any sense to me. These are the courses with the numbers that coincide with the academic course guide manual. And these are the courses that the students take at the community college that will need to be taken in order to transfer, and that will help them when they transfer to the college in these specific areas. It's not, boilerplate must be taken in this way, but in terms of advising, the onus of responsibility is on the institution to provide and ensure that the students see an advisor and ensure that they're well advised. The other question I have, though, is this in line with what has been done and the decision that's been made with the relationship between the coordinating board and the new Mathways project with the University of Texas Charles A. Dana Center? So do we feel comfortable? Was that made a consideration in this?
I know that there's new legislation that required that we come up with tracks in the core, and that's what this committee was trying to do, come up with general tracks in the core that would meet the requirements of that legislation and that would also help students. So I understand when you say what problem are we trying to solve, we do have these tracks in our own catalogs already, but that I think was part of the goal, was to come up with something that would suffice at the state and that the coordinating board could use.
Clarify that for us a bit, James?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yes, we had hints and intimations that this was going to be headed our way in the form of legislation, and we did see bills carrying this, HB 30, and I think maybe it was in our Sunset Bill for a while too. However, none of that actually passed. So it is, although we thought it was going to be a legislative imperative to get this done, it wasn't this session. Now, it certainly could and probably will come up again next session. So it's certainly possible. And I know that this is something that certainly some of us staff here at the coordinating board just thought was a good idea, because it seemed to be a perennial problem. To go back to Jeremy's excellent question, what problem are we trying to solve? It seems to be a perennial problem that students, when it comes to the core curriculum, don't often do a good job of figuring out what courses they need to take that fit with their major. They seem to generally do a better job figuring out what majors courses they need to take to fit with their major, but when it comes to the things that support the major but aren't directly the major, they seem to go all over the map. So the thought was, well, if we could at least direct them in the right direction, that could help. And so listening to the discussion today, I honestly am a little torn myself. On the one hand, there certainly seem to be some areas where there are specific courses that need to be taken. For instance, engineering, you've got to have calculus. I mean, there's no argument about that. You've got to have calculus. And if you're going into nursing or medicine, you've got to have biology. But I don't know whether the greater specificity is going to be more advantageous, or if maybe, some part of me thinks that maybe some more narrative statements are more helpful. That's why I made the suggestion earlier of, hey, if you're a science major, whatever you do, don't take non-science major courses. That's not going to help. Perhaps some of those kind of conceptual statements are more helpful to students rather than specific course requirements. Another option is that, we've had some discussion about how some of the occupations or fields listed here don't map one-to-one to then the courses listed below. Maybe if we broke this out a little bit more and broke out, say, pre-medicine and pre-vet or whatever's appropriate out from the other health careers and made that a separate field, maybe that would be helpful. I don't know. Keep in mind that we do have very specific curricular recommendations in some areas thanks to either field of study curricula development years ago or now to these transfer tuning compacts, right? In engineering, for instance, you've got exactly the courses you need to take laid out for you in the first 2 years of your education. There's no doubt there what you need to take if you pay attention to that. But that's an entire transfer curriculum. What we're trying to do here, I think, is more of a broad scope, point people in the right direction, not give them the detailed roadmap, because that's those detailed curricula. That's a detailed roadmap. Here we're just saying, go that way. Okay, if you're doing this, go that way. It's more general. So,
well, James, it looks like you're trying to take all possible courses within a particular area that a student could choose, let's say math or science, and narrow it down somewhat to try to focus it a little bit for students who are going to go into the health professions or STEM fields. But the lower division transfer compact curricula or field of study curricula make it clear that there are differences in the degree programs in those broad disciplines. Civil engineering looks different than mechanical engineering, which looks different than industrial engineering. And, one might argue that lower division requirements in the sciences or in the engineering fields may not need to have such variation. The fact is, it does.
To answer your question on Mathways, no, we didn't, because we didn't have a specific course. We still don't have a specific course laid out on that one. So, but that can be included.
Yeah, I think it's just something that we'll need to consider, as all 50 community colleges have already spoken and joined in on that, and the coordinating board has provided significant funding to support that.
As both a new member and an outgoing member, I think it puts me in a different position. Maybe what we need to do is not put courses in here, because it's clear that we're all very different in what we require in the STEM. I mean, if you're going into science-based STEM, you don't need calculus-based physics. You can do college algebra-based physics. But if you're going to be an engineer, God help you if you do college-based physics, because you need algebra-based physics, calculus-based physics, and maybe more prescriptive statements that say, if you think you want to be an engineer, please take the highest math you qualify for. If you want to go into a STEM-related field, you do not take a non-science-based science course, and then give a few examples. These are non-science-based science courses. These are science courses for science majors, and be much less prescriptive, because that will also help high school students who are doing dual credit guide them. I mean, how many of us see students who want to be engineers who the highest math they've taken is Algebra 2 and think they're going to go take college algebra at the community college and graduate in 4 years? Mm-hmm. And maybe that's kind of more of what we need to do, rather than say, you notice that no one's arguing at all about the business and economics, because that's so nice, narrow, and streamlined. But that might be a suggestion for where we go. And since we're not legislated right now to do tracks, maybe we can kind of wait until they figure out that it's really different to be a biologist, to be a physicist, and to be an electrical engineer.
Yeah, I'd point out, at least as far as the business and economics go, this is just a subset of what's already in the business field of study curriculum, these exact courses. So if you were to look at the business field of study curricula, you'd see what you need to take, and it would be the whole thing, all 12 or 15 hours of it, rather than just these two sections.
So, James, perhaps a narrative approach might be best at this point. If we're talking about putting this in our catalogs or something of this ilk, you list your core curriculum in a narrative section. You're interested in being a nurse. Be sure you include an anatomy and physiology class. Interested in being an engineer? Be sure you take the highest level math for which you're prepared, and maybe table the notion of specific tracks until we know there's going to be specific.
Maybe so. I think one of the things, to summarize kind of what we're trying to do, is to provide enough information to avoid having students misinterpret what their foundational courses need to be for whatever they're interested in, and take the wrong ones on the one hand. And on the other hand, not provide them something that they will interpret as, this is all I need, I can self-advise from here on in. Because students will do that.
Exactly.
And so perhaps some sort of a narrative approach like you're suggesting, which is very clear, are you thinking of being, those sorts of titles might get at that. In any case, I think the discussion has brought us to the point where we know that we need to do something else and something different, as there's lots of problems here. And some of the problems go away if we become less specific, and yet still directive, in the sense that James was, his pointing the directions, the vectors, kind of, rather than more placing anything in it which implies now you know something that you don't need to ask about. And so I guess then we can put off voting on this until another time, and we may need the next steps becomes revising this. Are we agreed that something like this might be useful, that we're not going to drop it altogether? Coordinating board is sort of interested in doing this because of the anticipation of being told to do it in a subsequent legislative session, and if so, perhaps we need to have another subcommittee take a look at how to revise and modify and bring this back.
I'd say, given the central focus that this item has on our agenda as our only real action item, and given that we're not even past noon yet, perhaps we could consider breaking the committee of the whole up into several groups, and each group pick an area and just talk about, maybe not perhaps fully draft a narrative, but if not, at least talk about what would need to be in the narrative, what elements would need to be there, and then you could come back as a committee of the whole and kind of share notes about each narrative, the narrative for each area, and just see how far we could get. What do you think about that, Dan?
I think that's fine, and the narratives wouldn't need to be, the groups could actually probably provide a narrative within an hour and a half. Why don't we take lunch? And is it here? Are we ready?
It should be.
You want to check? And then come back in a half an hour or so, and we'll take an hour and a half. For those, the only organization we need, I guess, is to have volunteers for the various areas where you think your expertise lies, and so we can. We'll have them during the lunch hour create tables out in the area there and label them and just show up at those conversations that you would like to engage in. Does that sound reasonable? Okay.
How many groups do you think would be productive to have? Keeping in mind that we can follow the structure here, 3 groups with these 3 labels. We could expand this a little bit if we want to split out, for instance, the health careers into 2 areas. We could do that.
It'd be easy to do with this kind of an approach. Yeah, 4.
Let's go with 4 since that's what's been talked about.
Okay. 4 groups. And so would one be the business and economics group?
I recommend we just use the 3 groups plus a 4th, and I think you had mentioned pre-professional, or I'm trying to, where'd she go? One was a health career / and the other one was a pre-professional medical or
pre-professional
health.
medical degree, something like that.
Yeah, so that group could actually define what that means.
Okay, so I've got pre-professional medical, business and economics, and then the more general health careers, and then the science and STEM, right? Yeah. Science and engineering. Okay. Sort ourselves?
Absolutely. Let's do it. Do you want to we can just label tables after lunch if you want and have people go to them.
Oh, yeah, how about that?
Or we can have them identify themselves now. But I thought just, if you just label, if you create some discussion areas and get some things so it's turned around so people are facing each other, and then just go to the area that you would like to talk about. I anticipate that somebody will show up in all of them.
I also recommend that a 4-year college be in each group. And,
yeah.
Well, I mean, a 2-year needs to be in each group, but I definitely a 4-year in each group.
Yeah, let's have a good mix. Okay, well, Melinda and I will set up some tables, each one labeled for the 4 groups, and you guys can just select yourselves into groups after we take our lunch break.
And we'll sort it out if we don't have a proper mix at that point. We would each group would read its narrative and then be available for answering questions at that point. So if we start with, why don't we just start at the beginning with the business and economics group?
Well, we're kind of the non-controversial group, I think. Students interested in an academic program in one of the many areas of business or economics should complete at least 1 semester of economics and 1 semester of mathematics for business and social sciences. Economics will count as a social behavioral science course as part of the core curriculum. Students should always check with the appropriate academic advisor before registering for any classes.
Any comments?
Comments? Surely someone's interested. Not a lot of you showed up at our table, but...
Well, I liked its economy, its succinctness, right? Because we know we're dealing with people who have the attention span of a gnat. Exactly. So I think it's best that we keep these things short. Students are used to 5 and 10-second bursts of information, so the more we get into verbosity, the more they get into too long, didn't read.
You want a copy?
I have a question. Even though I think there's an assumption out there that economics will, specific economic courses will be approved for social and behavioral sciences, you may have a college that doesn't put that in their core, and therefore, would it be a part of the core?
Well, it was listed on this matrix as a social behavioral science, and that's why we included that statement.
Well, should we say may be?
Certainly can.
As a social
probably
and behavioral
because
science?
I don't know, but does anybody, in terms of their core, is it not part of the core?
I think one of the thinking behind this was, with the recommendation, we would provide guidance to people with their cores. Especially if you're in business, you're going to need economics. So this would be a recommendation to people as they design cores or look at their core that economics probably could be part of the...
So I can change will count to may count. Okay.
And is there sufficient emphasis on the need for advising, or do we need to
students should always check with the appropriate academic advisor before registering for any classes.
Is that okay with everyone? Yes. Okay.
You think it's important that they check with an academic advisor rather than a generic advisor? We have people at our school that they call advisors, and they're fresh college graduates with education degrees that didn't find teaching jobs. And they come in and they advise, and we get some really interesting schedules that we've got to fix the first week of school. So we think academic advisor is important to put in.
I would think so. They don't need, social advice on this particular case.
May I share that on the first page, the last paragraph, some of this was addressed. Actually, David and I had suggested we may want to underline some of this, but we say for specific guidelines, students planning to transfer, this is the last sentence, I think, students planning to transfer to another institution should carefully examine degree requirements at the degree granting institution and should also seek advice from trained academic advisors at the institution in which they're enrolled. So, I mean, that was, we may want to highlight that, put in italics, blinking neon lights or something like that up front, and then...
And it can't be repeated too often, so...
I just took a look at the core curriculum webpage, and I started scrolling through the institutions and their social and behavioral sciences options, and I only got as far as Blinn before I found an institution that does not have economics at all in its social and behavioral sciences. Now, this is the current core, of course, not the future core, but still, just looking at it, neither does Brazosport. So before I even got done with the Bs, I found 2 colleges that don't have economics in there. So we definitely want to include a caveat. You're working on, okay, so that probably will have economics in it, right? Okay. May or may not, but that leads to the point that we probably want to put that may language in there because it's not a guarantee that every institution is going to have economics in their social behavioral sciences slot.
Okay, health careers or whatever we renamed it?
Health sciences, I think is what we called it, didn't we? 2 of us, neither of us are health science people, so that's going to be fun. We stated that for students who were preparing for a career in health sciences and wanting to transfer university, and the examples we gave to clarify that were nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, health administration. We actually went to some websites and found out that's what's listed when you talk about a health science area. And our recommendations, the core for science take, I guess now may take, 2 semesters of anatomy and physiology, ergo biology 2401 and 2402, and at least 1 major chemistry class, ergo 1411. And for math, take a college level algebra course or higher, ergo math 1314. A course in statistics may also be relevant, but check with an advisor. And then the last point was make sure to work with an academic advisor while making decisions and before enrolling in any course to determine major degree requirements.
Comments, suggestions?
So you've gone to 3 science classes now?
2.
Okay. I thought you said.
Basically the AMP and then at least 1 chemistry because that's what we found when we went through the degrees and recommendations. You can only take 2, actually 2 under the science part, but you can also have the, I guess, IDO and then eventually the CAO where you could look. So if a student's looking to go into health sciences, they should consider the anatomy and physiology classes as well as at least a chemistry class in that process.
Do we need to differentiate that they should take those science courses for science majors with labs? Like the chemistry, should it be a chemistry class for science majors with a lab?
We call it a majors chemistry lab, but
okay.
we can call it.
Or it could be a lab science.
To my mind, at least based on the experiences I've had, which again are not at your institutional level, but my experiences seem to indicate that that's one of the areas where general advice could be the most helpful and where students often have the most primary problems is they don't understand that there's a difference in science, even science courses with labs. They think, oh, if the science course has a lab, well, that should be good enough. No, that actually there are courses intended for people that are going into the sciences or allied health, and then there's those science courses intended for humanities types like me. and I think that's some of the best advice, again, if we're trying to hit the general population, again, at a very general level with the advisor giving the specific information, that some of the best advice we can give is, hey, if you're going into these health careers or these STEM careers, make sure that you take the science majors version of the course and take the lab, because you're going to be expected to have that.
So are we good for that one? Pre-professional?
For the pre-professional ones, we have students interested in pursuing a degree in the health sciences, such as but not limited to medicine, dentistry, physical therapy, should be aware that the foundation recommended is calculus and science courses for science majors. Students should enroll in the most advanced course in math for which they are deemed prepared. It is important that students consult with an academic advisor at an institution of higher learning regarding how course selection maps into degree plans and completion. Our focus was more geared towards students in high school who are taking dual credit courses, and it's more of an education for them, getting more information that they should seek someone at the community college or university level for that.
Would it be appropriate for this group to use interested in a career in medical sciences so that it differentiates a little bit from the group that we've already said health sciences?
That group could also include veterinary science, could it not?
That's where we include it, but not limit to. Just so we make sure this is more of a broader idea, but we're not focusing just on those three majors.
I think Colleen's suggestion is a good one. Do you agree? The medical sciences? Okay.
I'd like to ask the group a question. Did you decide that it's important to put the specific courses from the common course numbering, or were you saying to go more general? What did you think within your group discussion? Because that's where we had a lot of the discussion in our...
It was more of a general idea. Like I said, we were focusing more on students at the high school level just for the reason that they register for the courses, but they don't really get that advice as a career in a long term. They just kind of go for the courses thinking dual credit will get me to my degree, but without really knowing if that's required for their major or not. So if they have to consult with a higher ed advisor, it forces them to get that guidance directly from the advisor. And by including course numbers, it will just allow them to automatically go online and register for the courses compared to actually going and talking to someone in a one-on-one.
At the same time, I would argue that it maybe helps the advisors themselves understand what a anatomy and physiology class is sometime, depending who their advisor is, or particularly give a course number. I would throw in the other side is that we don't want to give them a specific and say you must take this course. But I think it would be good when you explain you need to take this category of courses, i.e. this is what one of those courses would look like. I think it would be helpful at least to narrow it down to what they're talking about. When you say a majors course, what's that? Well, this is a specific course. It's a major that they would encounter. So that's just the opposite, the other side of that.
So maybe for example.
For example, correct.
Because almost
an IE versus an EG.
Were you able to make that change? Okay.
So what I'll be including is the medical sciences, just to be a little bit more specific on that. And towards the end of our narrative, we can include the for example, IE, and have the included.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, science and engineering.
As with the medical sciences group, we assumed that our audience was going to be high school counselors and high school students along with their families. And we also felt that and we've discussed this all day, that really this should be a guidance document rather than anything that's intended to be prescriptive, and as much as we can get that point across, we thought that would be good. We didn't make any substantive changes to the introductory paragraph for the science and engineering section, although we thought perhaps we should go ahead and define it as science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, just to put everything out there. We thought that in the introductory material it would be appropriate to add an advisory along the lines of specific courses should be chosen in consultation with an advisor and guided by the intended baccalaureate degree program. Students are encouraged to become informed about their intended career path and the specific requirements of the associated baccalaureate degrees. We also added a couple of sections that kind of described the general baccalaureate level expectations for mathematics and sciences within these disciplines. For mathematics, we are suggesting the entry-level mathematics course for most baccalaureate STEM curricula is Calculus 1. Students should complete the highest level mathematics into which they place. Students should follow a calculus track rather than a statistics track. For science, we suggest most baccalaureate STEM curricula require science courses with laboratories for science majors. Specific science requirements vary by major, so careful advising in consultation with the receiving institution is recommended. We debated within our group quite a bit whether it was beneficial or not to include the specific courses, and so that was really something we didn't reach consensus on.
And we still got along with each other.
We did. We did. We were very happy. And at the end, just some general disclaimers. STEM is a broad grouping of curricula. Changing disciplines within STEM may require additional mathematics and science courses. Students who change major to a field other than STEM may find that courses taken from this track do not necessarily apply to the new degree program.
Sounds like it covers it to me. Does anybody have any questions concerning it or comments?
I like the coverage of the math in particular. I think that's the good kind of general guidance we can give. Look, if you're going in this area, you're going to have to get good at calculus sooner or later. You don't have to start with it, but you're going to have to end up there.
And to the point about looking at courses, I asked James and the staff to look up whether the engineering work, the pathways we had done, would fit this, and we found that it actually would not work.
There were some surprising examples. For instance, you'd think biomedical engineering would require both Biology 1 and Biology 2. It doesn't. Chemical engineering requires no biology. You need biochemistry instead. So this little chart, just in the first two engineering disciplines we went through, has it's not an exact one-to-one match over. And as David pointed out earlier, if we put out this chart and students were like, well, I'm going into engineering, so I'm going to take both semesters of biology, and then they find out they don't need it, boy, are they going to be mad at us.
So if you could email me your electronic versions. I think business economics only one is a hard copy at this point. Is that correct? Okay. Well, I'll take it and type it up for you. So please don't forget to do that for me. I appreciate it.
Okay. What do you want from the group for the coordinating board?
Where do we start?
Do you want approval of the general concept that?
Yes.
And as far as just having read these things, I've already forgotten the first one. So
right.
Everyone will need to see that, and I think that formal approval will have to come after we see the actual texts. Is that fair?
That sounds good to us staff, that if you'll approve this general concept of a move towards narrative, with the understanding that we'll get this ready for sort of a final consideration by you, that we haven't got the language in the absolute final form that we may want it, but this is the direction we're going.
Okay. So we'll entertain motions to for approval of the general concept of providing these narratives as general guides for students. Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Very good.
David, if I could, so I'm not sure if we will meet again, say, before the start of the fall. So what we may do is once we get this neatly transcribed and written up in a nice form, we may email it around to you all and ask you to sort of take an electronic final vote and just let us know if you approve of it, or we could still work on it, wordsmith a little bit via distance. And that way we wouldn't have to wait until the fall when we might meet again to actually get this ready to be useful in some fashion.
I was going to ask if we could do this electronically because it's just so much better. So I'm glad to hear that.
James, will you also kind of go through and put it in one voice? Say, for example, we alluded in our area to take the highest math for which you were prepared, and I believe Ann's group said it as well, but in different ways.
Right.
And so if we could just make sure that the language is consistent and
right, parallel constructions and when you deliver the same message using the same words. Yeah, absolutely.
And it can be your voice, James. Well, do we need further discussion of next steps for tracks? Do you want to talk about where this goes from here in terms of your end?
Yes, please. I think this, at least from our end, this, we already have a, core curriculum page, so I think this is an obvious addition to that. Once we get it in a form that we're all happy with, is to throw it up there on our core curriculum web pages. What else should we do with this? I understand, although I don't remember the name, that there is a statewide advisors professional association, right? So that this is something that we could share with them. Is there a different advisors association at the K-12 level than at the higher education level, or are they unified?
Different. It would be
separate.
I was
okay.
going to say, I don't know, but I would bet they're separate.
I bet you're right. So, but I'd certainly be willing to reach out to my colleagues at the TEA and get them to help me get in touch with the K-12 advisors, because it seems useful to share it with them as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And then I guess the final thing would be for any institution that wants to use this, put it in your catalog or throw it up on your web pages as well. Can you think of any other appropriate venues for disseminating this information? TACRO, perhaps? Texas Association of College Registrars and Admissions Officers, because admissions officers do some advising.
Well, they need to be aware of it.
Yeah. TACRO, okay. Okay.
Okay, you want to, Melinda and James, want to share what you have planned for us in the future in terms of dates and topics and all of that?
If we could, I'd like Melinda to lead off with just a word about the submission of new core curricula. First, I'd like to make sure that you're all aware and that our audience is aware that when it comes time for you to turn in your new institutional core curricula, that we are setting up some special web pages in order to allow you to do that. Melinda, you want to say a few words about that?
As you know, Lucy was the lead on this project and kicked it off for us. We've been making steady progress, working with our delivery excellence manager, Victor Reyna, and Heidi Langdon, our senior project manager, and her wonderful team of web developers here. We are completing internal testing here at the courting board, and we're going to begin external testing with 3 institutions next month to make sure that we are identifying and addressing any technological glitches. We want to make this as user-friendly as possible. We're going to have instructions and a guideline attached to that, so you can follow that, or your representatives, once everything gets going. It's on track to go live in early August for submissions through November. We think you'll be very pleased, and we do look forward to receiving your submissions. So very short and sweet, we're on track. It's looking good. We're happy with it. Internal, external testing. The external, again, has not begun, but we'll kick that off in a few weeks, maybe less than a week from now. And please feel free to email me, call me anytime if you have any questions.
On a more general note, the next time that we meet, I should be able to give you more specific information about not just rule changes that were approved by the board, because obviously I showed you a list of bills that passed, and that's going to lead to rule and policy changes, but it takes time for those things to happen. A lot of things are going to be brought to the July board meeting as emergency rules because we have to have them in place for the fall, but then they have to be basically brought before the board again in the fall to become permanent changes. So the next time we meet will probably be in the fall sometime, I would imagine. And at that time, I hope to be able to update you more about the actual final form that the rules took and how that's going to play out in terms of procedure. So just some additional updates for what's changing and how it's changing and how that's going to affect you. And by that time, we should also have a new assistant commissioner as well. So we may have new leadership, and that would be someone to introduce to you folks. Can you think of anything else, Melinda?
Maybe assistant director.
Yeah, there's probably going to be another. We're seeking to hire an assistant director to fill Lucy's spot. So that person would probably be taking over because I'm just kind of filling in for, I'm doing my spot and the other assistant director spot right now, so that person presumably would take over managing some of these committees and other responsibilities, so there'd be a new person for you to meet there as well.
What about Catherine's spot?
Yeah, the program director spot, we're also trying to fill those spots as well. Yeah, so we would hopefully by that time have 3, maybe 4 new program directors, a new assistant director, and a new assistant commissioner to introduce you to.
So it's not only the UEAC group that's mostly new.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's mostly new.
Yes, it's gonna be a whole new workforce, academic affairs, and research division, at least in a certain sense.
Very good. Any questions or comments? Any motion to adjourn?
I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
Never mind.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Trip home. And now, I did want to say, I did want to say formally, thank you to our subcommittee that came up with the material that we worked mostly on today. That was a good foundation for the progress that we made. It was provided an excellent basis for discussion, I thought. And I know they worked really hard on it. I was at the subcommittee meeting as well. I was impressed with the breadth of knowledge and concern that they brought to it, and so didn't want it to be passed over. Almost forgot. But have a safe trip home, and we'll see you in the fall sometime.
Great. Thank you. We'll be in touch about potential next meeting dates.
Hi, everybody.
Good meeting. Welcome aboard.